Hello, I'm Bella Vivante, Professor Emerita of Classics at the University of Arizona. I'm so pleased to be giving this open talk on the Oresteia. Mostly I'll be talking about the ancient Greek trilogy by Aeschylus and dovetailing into McLaughlin's new play, the Oresteia. Now, besides having been a classics professor for many, many years, I actually did my dissertation on the Oresteia. I have also acted in ancient Greek, and I've acted in earlier productions of the Oresteia. So I come to this from many perspectives, and it's a thrill to me, a joy to me, to be able to bring them together dramatically, intellectually, and interpretively. So enjoy this talk. Was this the face that launched 1,000 ships? Thus Christopher Marlowe immortalized for the modern world the ancient story of the Trojan War. Legend has it that this war was fought for Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, Queen of Sparta. And while her husband, King of Sparta, Menelaus, he got his brother Agamemnon to lead the Greek troops to retrieve Helen from Troy, whom the Trojan prince Paris had stolen and abducted all the way to Troy. After a 10-year siege, the only way the Greeks were finally able to win this war was through the ruse of the Trojan horse. Well, that's a thumbnail sketch of the outline of the story, and actually it's the story of Agamemnon and his family that forms the basis as the stories went on in the legend. And this is how it continued. So when Agamemnon amassed all the Greek troops at the harbor of Aulis, there were no winds, and the fleet couldn't sail. So the prophet to the Greek troops came and said to Agamemnon, "If you want to conquer Troy, you have to sacrifice the most precious thing to you, his daughter Iphigenia." And so Agamemnon did, and the winds came, and they sailed to Troy. Now, at the war's end, the gods warned the Greeks not to desecrate any of the sacred sanctuaries of Troy. So, of course, they did. And as a result, the gods punished the Greeks on their return home. Many of them were lost in shipwrecks at sea, and this was all seen by the Greeks as the gods' punishment. Now, among these atrocities at the end of the war was the rape of the Trojan princess Cassandra, who was also a priestess of Apollo. Now, her story was that Apollo was in love with her, and so he gave her the gift of prophecy. But she spurned his advances, and since he couldn't take his gift back, he made it so no one ever believed her, and so she becomes central also to the Trojan War story. Well, at the end, one of the Greek warriors raped her on the altar of Athena, and then she was given as a war prize to Agamemnon, and he takes her back to Mycenae, home back with him. But Clytemnestra is waiting. She's been nursing her resentment over his killing Iphigenia for 10 years. So she kills Agamemnon and Cassandra. And then the story waits for 10 years while their son Orestes comes of age. And then he comes and avenges his father's death, and Clytemnestra is killed. Notice my ambiguous language here. There's a reason for that, which we'll come to in just a moment. So Orestes' tale pretty much fades out, and it really varies in the later stories. But this is the basic story of Agamemnon's family and the Trojan War, as most Greeks would have known it. And this was filled out with stories of other heroes: Achilles, Hector, Ajax, Helen, Andromache, and many, many more. Now, this most popular story of ancient times generated threads that radiated out throughout Greek mythology. And ancient Greek plays vividly dramatize this tale on stage. In fact, almost half of the ancient Greek plays we have treat some aspect of this Trojan War story. Now, the most influential and probably the most vivid of all these plays was the trilogy of plays by Aeschylus, the Oresteia. Now, he breaks down this very long, complex story in each of his 3 plays, unified thematically in the trilogy. So the first one, the Agamemnon, tells Agamemnon's story, his return from Troy, and what happens after that. The second play, The Libation Bearers, is the return of Orestes and his taking vengeance with his sister Electra for his father's murder. And finally, the third play, The Furies, is the story of Orestes having to face the consequences for his actions. Like all poets, playwrights, artists of every time and age, every culture, they always tweak and fashion the material they get to their own purposes. And that's exactly what Aeschylus did in this great trilogy. He now tells his story from his own dramatic and historical perspective with exquisite poetry, vivid images, and dynamic storytelling. In case you can't tell, I think Aeschylus's Oresteia is a dramatic masterpiece and definitely 3 of the greatest plays ever in the entire world ever produced on stage. Okay, so on to what Aeschylus contributed now, his distinctive contributions, which is also how most of us know the story of the Trojan War, because it was so influential. So, first play of the trilogy, the Agamemnon, tells the story of Agamemnon. In 3 odes before Agamemnon's entrance, the chorus sings the background to the war and especially to Agamemnon's role in it. In the opening ode, the chorus sings of how Agamemnon agonizes over his dilemma when he learns the news that he needs to sacrifice his daughter. And it is, for a moment at least, a huge dilemma for him. But in the end, he ends up deciding to sacrifice. And the poetry describes him as veering into madness. And we get this crescendo of words meaning unholy to show what happens to Agamemnon's mind when he makes this decision to sacrifice his daughter. Dusebe, anagnon, anieron. And we, the audience, feel this madness that Agamemnon is veering into. The ode concludes then with this very poignant description of Iphigenia held over the altar as she is being ready to be sacrificed. And then the chorus cuts off because they can't stand to sing of the reality of what then happened. Now, the next 2 odes give us more background, especially Helen as being the cause of all this ruin. And each of these odes ends with hostility to Agamemnon, because he's the one who brought all this death and destruction to the Greeks. So we keep having this undercurrent of antagonism and hostility, and how is this going to play out? Now, it's really important that this comes up in the choral odes, because the odes are the foundation of ancient Greek drama. Choral odes in an oral society are the foundation of all ancient Greek rituals and all ancient Greek cultural festivals. So the odes present the general outlook, how the audience should understand then the specific action that's being played out for them on the stage. So we have this undercurrent of hostility before Agamemnon even enters. Now, the play also spotlights the horrors of war, as come up in these choral odes, and also in the Herald, the character who first comes in to introduce Agamemnon. He goes through all the minutiae of what a soldier has to deal with in camp life. Summer heat and bugs, winter cold and rains, lice, plague, hunger, restlessness, and he ends his speech reminding us of the punishment of the gods by drowning all the Greeks for their desecration of Trojan sanctuaries. Very ominous intro. So when Agamemnon now finally does enter the stage, the chorus summarizes their feelings towards him when he first launched the war. And in fact, they say to him outright, in direct language, "We thought you were mad when you launched this war." That said, he's returning as the conquering hero. Bygones be bygones, might makes right, so they now welcome him home as the hero who has conquered Troy. And according to the chorus and the rest of the trilogy, everything he's done that was wrong is forgotten. But not by Clytemnestra, because she has been nursing her resentment for 10 years. So perhaps the most famous, memorable scene of the first play is when Clytemnestra entices Agamemnon to walk on these wealthy, blood-purple tapestries in order to enter the house. Now, we have to keep something else in mind when reading the play, very easily overlooked, but this is meant to be visual. From the moment Agamemnon enters the stage on a wagon, Cassandra is standing next to him. So throughout everything that's going on with the herald, the chorus, and especially Clytemnestra, there stands Cassandra as a reminder of what Agamemnon is all about. So she entices him to walk in, which he does. She then is about to kill him off stage, and now Cassandra has her memorable scene with the chorus, sometimes in manic poetic outbursts, sometimes in reasoned dialogue speech. She reveals to the chorus all the ancestral and current horrors of the house. But of course they don't believe her, because that's her curse. And she then exits very dignified, giving her own lament as she knows she's going to her own death. And Clytemnestra will also kill her. One thing I forgot to mention when Agamemnon walks on these blood-purple tapestries, which are a sign of wealth, so again, something very precious, a symbol of how he destroyed the wealth of his house in killing Iphigenia, but also his easy submission to Clytemnestra's power of persuasion, and we'll see why that's important coming up. The play ends with this vivid concluding tableau. There's stage machinery that rolls a platform out with Clytemnestra standing over the dead bodies of Agamemnon and Cassandra, glorying in being the spirit of vengeance that avenged the murder of her daughter Iphigenia, and she glories in that. She is embodying the unseen spirits the chorus has been singing of throughout their odes. Ate, destruction, will meet her again. Dike, justice, right, who comes up repeatedly. And of course the Irinis, the Furies, whom we will meet in the third play. Twice now in the play, characters have claimed that they are enacting justice by carrying out an act of vengeance. Agamemnon to begin with, and now Clytemnestra. In both cases, however, taking on the spirit of vengeance affects the avenger's mind, as the play has described for Agamemnon, and as we also see for Clytemnestra. So at the end, over this concluding tableau, the chorus blame Clytemnestra for killing Agamemnon, and she keeps saying, "What about his killing Iphigenia?" And by the end of the play, the chorus don't know who has right on their side, and they are in a quandary because they don't know how to choose, even though they wanted to be with their king. And it is exactly this clash of conflicting rights that becomes the central theme in the next play, The Libation Bearers. So the focus of this play is Orestes and Electra together working to avenge their father's death. So the play opens with Orestes coming in to leave a lock of his hair on Agamemnon's grave. And in his opening speech, he also tells us that Apollo urged him to return in order to take action to avenge his father's death. He then hides because Electra now enters with the chorus, and she's carrying an offering from her mother Clytemnestra, who had a dream the night before that she had given birth to a snake that was then biting her as she was trying to breastfeed. So she was giving these offerings to allay this dream. Now, when Electra comes to Agamemnon's grave and she sees Orestes' lock of hair and she sees a footprint, she immediately assumes it's Orestes that must have been there, which every other Greek playwright in any subsequent play mocks greatly that she would come to this immediate conclusion. Nevertheless, this is part of the plot of this play. Orestes and Electra reunite because he had been elsewhere, so they didn't know each other. The chorus urged the two of them to take vengeance, and they keep repeating that this is a clash of rights. Dike versus Dike is their mantra throughout many of their odes. And they even get Orestes' old nurse involved in this vengeance plot. Orestes has a moment of doubt when he confronts his mother on stage, and it's his companion who reminds him of Apollo's command and that he has to kill his mother, and then he forces his mother off stage, and again he will kill her off stage. The concluding tableau of the libation bearers echoes the concluding tableau of the Agamemnon. Again, the platform is rolled out. It is now Orestes standing over the dead bodies of Clytemnestra and her lover. But even though these visual tableaus are virtually identical, the underlying feeling and meaning is very, very different. As I noted, Clytemnestra fully gloried in being the spirit of vengeance that killed Agamemnon. But Orestes is torn. He's humble. This was a command by the god. It's not something he wanted to do. He's completely ambivalent about his deed. So unlike Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, he is not glorying in having become the spirit of vengeance. This is eating him up instead. And this now is the signal that we're going to have a shift in the whole notion of what justice is about. So far throughout the plays, justice has been a cycle of revenge killings that go on endlessly, because obviously one killing is going to lead to the next, and so on and so on and so on. But with the shift in Orestes' attitude, there's a hope that maybe there can be an end to this endless cycle. That hope is frustrated, because at the end of the libation bearers, Orestes in his mind sees a vision of the Irinis, the Furies, come to punish him for killing his mother. And now the matricide. According to the earliest ancient version of the tale that we have, which is in Homer's Odyssey, about 2.5 centuries before Aeschylus, we are told there that Orestes killed Clytemnestra's lover, and the implication is that his companion killed Clytemnestra. So the matricide may very well be Aeschylus's innovation for this story. And if it is, that means it is serving Aeschylus's purpose within his overall tale, that this is not now only a matter of revenge, but is far more serious as becoming a matter of matricide. And this is why Orestes' story now becomes so important in the rest of Aeschylus's trilogy. Recall, the name of the trilogy is Oresteia. So it is Orestes' story that really is the focus. The first play told us of Agamemnon. The second play will get rid of Clytemnestra, more or less, from at least the dramatic plot line, but the focus now really is on Orestes, which is what we see in the second play, and also what we shall now see in the third play. So now, with the third play of his trilogy, Aeschylus does something very different. In the first two plays, he pretty faithfully followed the traditional story, of course elaborating it with his own visions and images. But with the third play, he creates a completely new scenario for Orestes' story. And the scenario, of course, is what has held in the imagination of all subsequent playgoers. So the third play, called in English The Furies, it is now the Irinis, the Furies, who comprise the chorus of this third play. They are hideously costumed. They are horribly described. The prophetess of Delphi, where the third play opens, ends up crawling out on all fours because she's so frightened by their hideous display. And the rumor from the time is pregnant women in the audience ended up with miscarriages because their vision was just so horrific. So this is our opening scene. Now, to subdue them, here comes the god Apollo, young, beautiful, shining. The visual cues are going to tell us a lot about what is going to happen in this play. So Orestes has come to Delphi to be cleared of his guilt by Apollo, who's not able to do that, or he's only able to do so much because the Furies are after him. So Apollo brings Orestes to Athens to have Athena decide this. Notice the action of the third play has shifted, or is shifting, from the human realm to the divine realm. This tells me that this issue of justice and of a clash of rights has become so huge in these first two plays that the only way Aeschylus can see how to solve it is to remove it to the world of the gods, because humans can't possibly deal with such a huge impasse of justice. The irony is, when Athena establishes the first court to decide a murder trial, it's human jurors, because even she says she can't decide something so momentous all on her own. Anyway, they come to Athens. Athena establishes the trial, the first trial for murder, and Apollo advocates for Orestes. And his final argument is that the mother is not the true parent of the child, so Orestes could not have committed matricide. Now, most scholars spend pages and pages seriously trying to interpret Apollo's argument. I think it would have caused all kinds of guffaws of laughter in the audience, because it flies in the face literally whitewashes two important cultural aspects. It whitewashes traditional myth, because Athena did have a mother, it's just that Zeus swallowed her. The story about Athena is like this. Zeus did want to get together, mate with her mother, but there was a prophecy the child would be greater than the father. And of course, Zeus didn't want that, so he swallows Athena's mother, whose name Metis means cunning and cleverness. And so Zeus swallows cunning, Athena is born out of his head, and that's why Apollo points to her, making the claim that she does not have a mother. It also completely contradicts contemporary Athenian law, because in contemporary Athenian law, the mother is the legal parent of the child. So I think the Athenians in the audience would have thought, okay, Aeschylus is going into fantasy comedy now. Nevertheless, however specious it is, his is the winning argument. So during this trial, the other thing that comes out and is very important is the role of the Irinis. These are age-old, ancient female goddesses, and their role is to punish crimes, especially murder. And in the third play of his trilogy, Aeschylus narrows that even more, so that all they are meant to punish is family crimes, family murder, not murders in general. So we have this conflict between these deities who represent, the other part is that they bless people who do live a righteous life. So they actually are the upholders of a moral society. They bless the righteous, punish the wrongdoers. So this is the clash now between these traditional goddesses who uphold the morality of the society, and now these new deities bringing in a new way of understanding. And the play itself speaks in this language. So the human jurors are evenly split. They can't decide which one, again, has right. We still have this clash of rights. Apollo's argument, even though it was specious, ends up being the winning argument. And Athena actually proclaims, I have no mother, and I'm for the male in all things. And so she breaks the tie by what's known in actual Athenian law courts as Athena's vote of mercy. Orestes is acquitted. He and Apollo silently and quickly exit the stage, and the human drama appears to be resolved, and maybe the concept of justice has been resolved. We've now moved from this endless cycle of revenge killings to a new way of dealing with these infractions, trial in a court decided by jurors. Something seems to be resolved, but not on the human level, because now the Irinis also have to be brought in to this new world order. Now, Athena is portrayed and is seen as the tokenistic spokeswoman for this new patriarchal order. Now, some of you may know me, so you may think, oh, that's the feminist in her speaking out once again. No, this is actually the conventional scholarly interpretation of what Athena is doing, and that what we have is the establishment or bringing in of a patriarchal order. This is now the actual language of the play. These ancient goddesses are insulted, they're angry because these young male gods are overriding their ancient prerogatives, are showing them absolutely no respect. And so Aeschylus is reflecting what is fairly known. Historically, we have a transition from an older, female-valuing, goddess-worshipping culture that is now been overtaken by a newer, patriarchal, male-run culture. This is the language of the play. I'm not making it up, believe me. This is what Aeschylus is portraying. And so now Athena has to keep the Irinis from destroying Athens. Because in their anger, this is now what they're going to do. They're going to destroy Athens. So she now is going to give 4 speeches where persuasion is the central theme. And she now represents good persuasion to counterbalance the destructive persuasion of Clytemnestra in the earlier play. Each speech of hers, she begins by talking of how great she is at persuasion, and just in case you had any doubt about that, she backs that up with threats of violence. Anyway, but after her 4 speeches, the chorus claim, and again this is the actual language in the Greek, that they have been charmed by her words and are willing to accept what she has offered. So what she offers is she still recognizes all their ancient prerogatives, not taking any of those roles away from them. But they will now have to exercise those roles within the rule of Zeus. And they will have to answer to Zeus instead of acting on their own given prerogatives, as it were. So the end of the play, the end of the trilogy now, is a huge celebration. We celebrate odes and odes. We celebrate this new concept of justice. No more revenge killings. We now have, orderly court trials. And now the Irinis have been brought in to bless Athens. And at the end of the play, we have a celebratory procession in which the Irinis are clad in red cloaks, which is a sign of foreign nationals in Athens, and they will have a new home underneath the city of Athens. So they become circumscribed within this new patriarchal order. So while on the one hand we have this enlightened new system of justice, Aeschylus has portrayed it as going along with a whole other gendered changes, gendered shifts in the society. And even though in the first 2 plays it was Zeus and Apollo, the male gods, who supposedly encouraged Agamemnon and Orestes into their acts of revenge, by the end it's these ancient female deities that get associated with this old cycle of revenge killings, but it's these new gods who represent this new enlightened age, and it's Athens that is the harbinger of this new enlightened age. And even with all that, Aeschylus's trilogy is a dramatic masterpiece. He was able to present 3 plays over the course of much of the day. And so that can encompass such a cosmic suite from, gods and goddesses and changes in society and injustice. But how do you do that in a play for a modern audience? That's not going to be a trilogy, but going to be one play. Can that be even encompassed in a modern dramatic convention? Well, I think Ellen McLaughlin has done exactly that in her Oresteia. So, like poets and playwrights, like Aeschylus even, what McLaughlin has done is she has been reweaving all these ancient threads into her new vision, new dramatic vision of Aeschylus's story, his trilogy. And so what I'd like to do is just point out a few ways of how McLaughlin has carried on Aeschylus's trilogy, but I don't want to give away anything that might interfere with your appreciation or interpretation of McLaughlin's play. So, the first two acts of McLaughlin's play faithfully evoke the first two plays of Aeschylus's trilogy. But she doesn't do this in some literal translation, but by imaginatively evoking the themes and scenes of these first two plays in her first two acts. In some cases, she recreates scenes from the original trilogy, like that dramatic scene of Clytemnestra luring Agamemnon to walk on the tapestries to enter the palace. In other ways, she imaginatively evokes the essential dramatics of Aeschylus's trilogy through how she uses her chorus, through the scenes she creates, even bringing new characters like Iphigenia onto the stage to bring together all these basics from Aeschylus's trilogy. So now for the third act of McLaughlin's play, she does what Aeschylus did for the third play of his trilogy. She creates an entirely new scenario. In order to deal with the conflict of rights, the judicial justice impasse, Aeschylus had moved the playing field to the world of the gods, to the divine realm. McLaughlin does pointedly the opposite. She almost elides the gods out completely from her play, and she pointedly focuses, spotlights the human dimension of what's going on. So if we don't have the gods to decide things, what will decide the end? Now, in addition to this, when Orestes has his vision of the Furies, they seem to be completely internal. And Electra even says it's a sign of his mental instability. So we have no actual Furies on stage for Orestes to see, or who represent cosmic justice. No actual Athena on stage, a divine being who can settle this impasse. So what is it McLaughlin does do to bring a resolution to these conflicts? Now, McLaughlin may choose to largely elide out the role of the gods in her play, but that doesn't mean there isn't a powerful force she uses to finally bring in for a resolution. And I think with that, I'll leave it for you to discern just what that powerful force is, so that you may fully enjoy McLaughlin's play.